Um, okay, so I'm going to go for basically a string, right? So by the way, I have my GitHub Copilot working here, so I hope you'll be doing some nice job there to help me with that. So somehow he identified that I wanted a variable, so now we get a string, which is what I wanted to get. So the method that I wanted to show is the split method. If you recall, yesterday I shared a cheat sheet of some string methods. I hope that it's helpful for you. And I asked to learn one particular kind of trick of decomposing the whole string into individual characters. And do you recall what that method is?
Exactly.
And how do I use that to get individual characters?
Scope those copy.
In bread that the break is
And what do I put in the phrase?
Calls.
What kind of quotes?
Just the generate without.
If it doesn't matter, double quotes also works there. So, okay. So we go for a split, not a length. Split. As you have seen yesterday, there's Copilot. We're then part of the problem. So as I mentioned in one of the screenshots that followed the cheat sheet, one of the benefits of using TypeScript is that TypeScript can identify such parts of your code when it thinks it's risky, so it warns you anyways. So again, as I showed in one of the examples, this is not correct. And as you can see, TypeScript simply refuses to compile, right? So you can configure TypeScript in two ways. First, if there is any kind of issues, it will simply refuse to compile your code, which is what we have here. That's, I think, by the default behavior. You can also tell TypeScript to go ahead and compile your code anyways, even if TypeScript thinks there is an issue. So anyways, there is not a code issue here. As you can see, I'll go into the browser, right? And I'll run this code and we shall see that it returns some value. However, it does not return what we think it should return. So the code works, right? It returns now an array which contains one single string, which is our original string. However, our intention was to separate the string into individual characters. So this is not the correct way to use split at all. And there is no code error here. However, TypeScript refuses to compile the project. So what we're going to do here, we're going to make TypeScript happy with providing that single kind of argument here, which is the empty string. And when we save this, then we will get an array of our individual characters, right? So we have the space, G, J, O, H, N, so cool. We have this working correctly. Okay, so from a string, we get another data structure. We get an array. So that's kind of helpful in a way that you can now separate your strings by new lines. You can, if you recall, one of the tasks from Edward's session yesterday was you had these words on new lines, right? So if you get a big string which has new lines, you can just do a split by a new line character, right? And you will get each individual word in an array as a separate element. So the split method is used quite a lot. I recommend you learn it. I recommend you remember that this is incorrect to not specify the separator. And just know that one of the most used cases is like to split the sentence or the text by string by space, by new line, or whatever character it is. Or if you are, for example, parsing some CSV file by the delimiter there, which may be a semicolon or something like that. So this is a very, very helpful method to learn and to know about. Okay, so we have an array. So let's do something else. Let's put this into a name characters, right? So let's put it into a variable. And as you can see, again, TypeScript does its magic, because if I hover on my name, we can see that it is a string, right? So, and when we do the split here, it does know that what we get as a result is an array of strings. So now our array is kind of strictly typed, and we have a string of array. So we cannot do like numeric operations on it by default. TypeScript will show you some errors there. So that's also helpful. Now what we can do is what we have not seen, what we can do with arrays, we can kind of reverse the elements, right? So we can make so that J is the first element of the array, it can then become the last element of the array, and vice versa, right? So the letter E of the surname Doe can become the first element instead of being the last element. So the way to do that is to use the method called reverse, right? And as we can see, the order is now reversed. However, you should remember that this method does an in-place replacement of the array, right? It does not create a new array, but it does the replacement, in place. So the way to kind of show that is, if I create a new array, right? And I assign these name characters into new array, then I will go ahead and do a console log of new array and name characters. Yeah, and we can see this is our new array. This is the characters. Now we do the reverse. The reverse, we call the reverse method, and then we log both of them again. So let me just console log some kind of separator here, so it's visually easier for you to recognize the difference. So this is what it means when I say reverse does an in-place kind of reversal. So this is our new array variable, right? And this one is the new characters variable, because that's the order we specify them in the console log. Now, this is our delimiter. Before that, we did the reversing process on the name characters. Now you can see that we did not do that on the new array, right? So we did that on name characters. And this is our the delimiter. However, what you can see here, and this is the in-place kind of reversal mechanism, and also the referential types working here. As you can see, after I did the reversal on the name characters, actually both of them contain the reversed array. So you should be careful with this. To avoid this, you would have created a new array or do maybe something like this, right? So this is the spread, the spread operator I showed yesterday to some of you. So this operation creates a kind of clone of the original name characters array. So in that case, when I do the reversal on that clone, as you can see, the original arrays are not kind of affected. So so be careful with the reverse with the reverse operation. Okay, so let's remove all this code here. We don't need this. We don't need this. Yeah. So okay, so what we have now, we have the my name variable, right? So okay, let me just remove this. Okay, so we have the John Doe. We separated. We now have an array of each element of each character, of each individual character. Then we do the reversal, and now we can do something interesting with this. And now we're going to do a task. And then what I would like you to do is you should use the dot map method on the palindrome words array to return a new, in the brackets, transformed array of Boolean values, which means true or false. If the word is a palindrome, return true. Otherwise, return false. So the result should be something like this. true. I don't know. I'm just typing random things. Okay, true, false, false, true. Okay, so you should get something like this from the original array of strings. Now, what is a palindrome? Okay, let's explain this. Okay, so the palindrome is a word which spells the same way both directions. Okay, so when you take the word, reverse it, it is exactly the same as it was before. So now you can see why I showed the reverse, right? You can I think get the idea. So you take the word, you reverse it. If they are equally the same, they are equal, that's a palindrome. So if the word is a palindrome, in its position in that original array, you return a true. So it should be true in the same position. If it's not a palindrome, you should put false there. So you will have to get an array which is the same length as the palindrome words array, but instead of the words, you will put true if that word is a palindrome, and false if that word is not a palindrome. And of course, use the dot reverse and comparison operators to accomplish this task. And split, of course. Split. So that's a lot of hints already. We have 10 minutes to do this. Okay, everyone, please stop typing, stop coding, and let's look at the screen. I'm just going to write some kind of quick pseudocode or something to just basically show what was all this thing about. So I'm going to uncomment this variable. Now what we have here is we have let's just where's my command line? Let me see. Yeah, let's go. Palindrome words, right? So I'm going to remove all this. So the task was to, given the palindrome words variable, but we should use the dot map as element, right? So we should use the dot map to get a new array of Boolean values, and we should check if our word is a palindrome, then we should return true, and otherwise we should return false. So element, so let's go for a word, right? So let's have some semantic variable names here. So we have palindrome words, or we can even go for a palindrome word, whatever. I'm going for a variable called word. So what I need to do first, I need to take my word, split it into individual characters. So let's go for that. And I'm doing split. Now I have my individual characters, right? So let's also go for a return here, and I do the console.log, and we'll kind of gradually see how it turns out. So now, of course, as we know, the dot map on an array returns a new array. So it transforms whatever values you have, it returns a new array. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable called transform the words, right? And then assign whatever the dot map returns, which is a new array, to that variable. Now we're going to console log that thing. And now what we can see, we have an array of arrays, right? So each word now is transformed into an array of characters, which means we just split out the characters of each individual word. So for example, for the word common, and we have an array of each individual character. Okay, so let's do something like this. Now it of course shows the trick there. And so the first step was to just split everything, right? And then what we need to do, the palindrome is a word which you should reverse and compare with the original one. So the algorithm is very simple. It is as simple as the coding, right? So we split it into individual characters, we reverse all characters, then we use the join to combine them together into a new word. And then what we're going to use to do, basically, we're going to just compare the original word with the reversed word. If it's a true, then we have a palindrome. If it's not true, then we've got a word which is not a palindrome. So there you go, your Boolean. So this was that simple. This is as simple as it looks. But what we're discussing is that this reverse method is available on arrays, so it is not available on strings, and that is why we would have to split the string into an array of characters, then reverse the elements in that array, and then combine them back into a string. So that's why we would have to do something like this. Okay. So that's about the task.
Could you please send us the solution?
Sure.
Let's interpret our grass and not. Don't make better us. We'll run little bits of the video.
Cioè, tu redarsnumens ko të vjall elemente.
Konkretizmen pa jo.
Imate este redarsnej array, true, stellen redarsnej false, og derfor essence bonus. Stadsbilder array. Skal sagt? Okay. Okay, so now what we're going to discuss is how to identify if a variable holds an array, right? So what operator did we learn? If we would like to know what type of variable or value is in a variable, what kind of operator we can use? Type. Right, so let's try to use type of with an array, right? So array values and 1 true alone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to console.log array values, and let's see what we could get. So yeah, let me just clear my terminal. Yeah, so this is our original array, of course. Now what we're going to do, we're going to just log the type of array values. And now what we're going to see is that it just logs object, but we're working with an array. And this just mentions that arrays are a complex data structure. They are kind of relative to objects. What are objects? We'll be learning today. We'll start with that. However, it's counterintuitive that you do type of on an array and it says on an empty array or an array of one element and it says object, right? So we would like to get array or something like that to just identify, because now if I do a type of on an object, sorry about that, we didn't learn what an object is, but I'm just showing that both of these things show the same kind of results. So it's kind of hard to identify whether an array is an object. However, what we can do is we can use the array.isArray method, right? And then we can specify an array value, and it will say whether that variable holds a reference to an array, or it does not. So in this case, array values is an array, so that's true. An empty array is also an array. An array containing Boolean is an array. So any kind of array, whether it's empty or not, array is array. It will say it is an array. And if I give it a number, or if I give it a Boolean straight, if I give it an object or anything else that is not an array, it will say false. So array is the way to identify whether your value that you're working with or the reference of that value is an array. So memorize this, and you should be using it a lot. Okay, so one other syntax regarding arrays, and that extends also to objects, I'm going to show you is kind of pulling the values from an array, but in a nicer way. Okay, so let's let's go for an array of values, right? So how do I get the value? How do I get 3 from this array? How can I do that? Can anybody help with this?
Array 2, index 2 or...
So array with an index 2, right? So we get 3. Yeah, that's good. Okay. But what if I wanted to get the element with index 0? I would go for a 0, right? And maybe I would have to, if I would like to put this into a variable, numeric value, I would do something like this, not numeric, but numeric value, and I log this. It is still 3. Oh, sorry, 1, the first element. But there's a nicer way to do this, right? So we can kind of eliminate this part. We wouldn't. There are times we don't have an index, or we would not like to work with an index, or we don't even need to work with an index. So the way to do that is to go for a syntax like this. This was added in 2015 with the ECMAScript 6. So this is called array destructuring. So you are kind of pulling the values from the array with this new syntax, right? So what you do after the let or const, you go for a square bracket, and you specify some variable names in this square bracket. So and the indexing is preserved, right? So if so the numeric value will hold 1. So if I go for another variable name, another value, now this one will hold the value 2. So basically we start from the beginning, and then we kind of progress as we do with array elements. So then if we log the numeric value, it is still 1. And we can go for another log. I forgot I'm in my editor, so we can go for logging the another value. It is true. Okay, so what if we would like to get the value of the first element and then the third element? So we don't care basically about these two. So we can do is we can put a comma there, right? So just kind of, this kind of means just skip the second element. I would like to get the first one with 0 index, but the one with index 1, we don't care, so skip it. And then I would like to get the one with index 2. So there we have it. So 1, 0, 0. Now the element with index 0 is 1. The element with index 1 is with the value of 2 is skipped, right? So we don't have any variable name. And the element with index 2 holds is in the variable called another value, and we can just basically do this as much as we need, right? So this syntax is used pretty frequently if you would just simply would like to pull the very first element from the array. So you can just do this instead of this. So nicer way to do that. So that's array destructuring.
That's in the
Just good stuff.
Does it called destruction of the array?
Pardon?
How does it called?
Destructuring of arrays. Or simply destructuring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ja, wat is een de copy kan is de dan is 13.
Okay, so I've resumed the recording, and we're going to start a new topic, and we're going to discuss objects and what objects are in JavaScript. Again, we're not going to talk about the prototypes inheritance, which is not really an inheritance. So we're not going to discuss classes, creating new objects with a new keyword, etc. So when we get to the classes, that's when we'll discuss all this stuff. For now, whatever we discuss regarding to objects, think about them as just a new kind of data structure, like a new way to store your values or data. Okay. So what is an object? What would be the kind of simple explanation of object, or what is an object in JavaScript? Well, objects in JavaScript are some key value stores, right? So, and arrays are also key value stores. Let me show an example of what I mean. Let's say we have 45 here, we have true, we have, I don't know, hello. So the way I kind of get this value is const or array equals to this. So the way I get the value of the first element is array, and in square brackets I specify 0. So basically this kind of means that the the index 0 is assigned, or the value 45 is assigned an index 0. So index 0 is 45. Then let's go for the other indices and values. So index 1 is kind of assigned, or it refers to the value true, and the index 2, which is the last index in our array at the moment, it refers to the value hello. So you can quickly see here that our indices are kind of mapped to values. So we have a key value storage here too. So our key is 0 and the value is 41. The key is 1 and the value is true. The key is 2 and the value is hello. So keys and values. Okay. So what is an object then? So and an object is like the original kind of data structure in JavaScript, which holds these keys and values. Of course, as I kind of showed you, arrays are also some kind of key and value store, but they are very specific key and value store, because all the elements in our arrays have a specific order, right? We start with index 0 and then we go up. And we have some interesting methods like .filter, .reduce, .map, which we do not have on, for example, objects. So arrays are a very kind of specific key value store, and objects are a general key value store. Okay, so the syntax of objects in JavaScript is you start with the square brackets, and then literally you go for a key and then a value. So the way you write it is key and then a column and your value. And your value can be pretty much anything. It can be a string, it can be a number, it can be, I don't know, Boolean value, it can be an array of whatever value it is. And yeah, let me just assign this object, then object value, yeah. And let's also console.log this object value, however, not that. Okay. So yeah, as we can see, and the way we kind of log all this, by the way, I'm running this TypeScript code in my Node.js environment. So this is server environment, just so you know. So the way it logs, it basically logs the same way I kind of define the object, right? It starts with this, with a curly bracket, then our key and column and the value of that key. So having said that, arrays are also kind of key value store. However, in case of arrays, the keys are numbers, right? So, I mean, the normal arrays. Okay, so this concept kind of sound and look similar. So if in an array, the key is a number, and to get the value of that key, we kind of need to put that number in that square brackets. So we might imagine that doing something like that in arrays should be similar, and it actually is. So what if we would like, and in this case, the key is maps to our value, right? So, and this is the value. So the way we can just kind of fetch the value of that key is console.log object value key dot key. So this is the dot. This is the so-called dot notation And however, we're more familiar with the bracket notation, right? So we can use also brackets, and we can say, give me the value of key, and there you go. The other syntax would be the dot key. There is a difference. There is a subtle difference between them. As you can see here, we just type dot and then say key, but here in the square brackets, it is actually a string value. So okay. So what kind of keys we can have in objects? Now we know that object is a key value stored. And we also know, and we also discussed that we can have any kind of values, right? So we can have arrays, we can have arrays in arrays, like whatever it is, JavaScript supports that. But what about keys? Like what kind of keys we can have? So it turns out in JavaScript, you can have only two types of keys. So the key can be string. If you specify anything else than a string, it is kind of converted into a string. So as you can see here on the left side of the editor, we have the key called, like, okay, let's go for a name, right? So I'm going to repeat the key a lot of times. So this object has two keys or two properties. The first one is name. Name itself is a string, so no problems there. However, the second key or property of this object is 0, the number 0. But as you can see on, yeah, that's correct. Again, TypeScript helping us out. Now, as you can see on the right side in the terminal, it is a string. It is not a number. So very important to remember that if you specify anything other than a string here, except for the data type called symbols in JavaScript, we're not going to discuss symbols. So anything else will be converted into a string. So the only two kind of types of keys we support is strings and symbol. We don't discuss symbols, so the only one left is strings. Whatever else it is converted back into a string. I can also say true, right? So this is a Boolean value, as we know in JavaScript. However, it is string. It is converted into a string in the object.
Sorry, and long question. Like if we are having a number in key, like it's showing the first like these key values after in the output, like after another, yeah. Because if you are writing number, it's showing me the first like in the output.
Mm-hmm. So to answer that question, okay, so if your keys in an object, I actually do not want to discuss this because it's just too much information, but if you ask the question, I'm going to answer. Now, if you have some numeric keys, right, you have, I don't know, 0, you have 10, you have whatever, right, you have numeric keys, you have also string keys, right, textual keys. So the numerical keys will be sorted by the increasing order, and the string keys like name and true here will be sorted in their creation order, right? So if the name comes first, you will see name. If it's true, then it will be true. In the console log, you might not see that, but however, as we learned, there are 3 for loops, right? So the iteration one, the classical one, we have for off, which does what?
Value.
It gets you the values, and we also have another one which is for in, and what does for in?
Key.
It gets the keys. And as you remember, we discussed that you should not use for in with arrays. However, the for in loop is specifically created for objects. Okay, so the specific use case of for in loop is objects, to get the keys of an object and then to get the values. So in that for in loop, these numerical keys, so 0. So let's say 0 and then right. Georgian characters will connect or consent over online button. Let's see. Hello 1, like whatever. Okay, so we can have 0, we can have 10, we can have 5, right? So in that foreign loop, these keys, the numerical keys, will be sorted in the increasing order. That's how you get it, how you get them. But the string ones, you will get them by the creation order, which means that name comes before true, and that is how you will get it in the foreign loop. And if we would go for true and then name, the first one you would get in the foreign, as you can, okay, so it even does that in the console. Okay, so it does the sorting there. So that's even better to demonstrate. Otherwise, I was thinking about writing the foreign loop, but there you go in the console. So as you can see, the numerical keys are sorted in the increasing order, and they are transformed into strings, right? They're not numbers anymore. And then the string kind of keys are kept in the creation order, right? So that's the answer to your question. This is not something you usually care about or you're interested about. Maybe some very specific cases where the order of the keys in your objects is important to you. Why should that be the case? I don't know. Okay, so usually I don't think about stuff like this, but that's how it works in JavaScript. Okay.
Like, when we are like checking, for example, the first out, second output, should be different. It will be, I think, it's good to know.
Okay, so my argument there will be, if you aren't caring about the order, you should have arrays. Okay, so that's the data structure where you have ordering.
But it was interesting.
Yeah.
How it was working.
Yeah, this is the behavior. It's very specific. So usually you don't care about this. You don't even need to know about this to work with arrays, objects. But this is how it works. Okay, so it stores the numerical keys in the ascending order and then keeps the ordering of the string keys in the creation order. So yeah, that's about that. Okay, so we've talked about the dot notation and the square brackets. However, you might ask, okay, so why do we have two ways of getting values from an object? Now, to answer that question, I'm going to create a variable called object key, right? I'm going to put this string into that variable. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to console log, Copilot already knows what I want to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to console log the value with the name this, right? But that name is hold, but that key name, which is name, is hold in the variable called object key. So what do you think this will console log? These two lines. Are you sure about that? Are you sure?
No, there is no object on the right.
No, but it will create
Now, think about this. Couple of seconds, okay? So we have the key name. Now instead of having the key name as a string here, so I just hold it inside a variable, right? And then in the square brackets, instead of specifying the string value, I specify the variable name. So what do you think this will console log?
No, I think.
And John, you think or you know?
I know.
No.
I know.
This.
Because we give the object key a value and we give in the index of object value that key. 5.
It will console log John, okay? So this is what I wrote, okay, in Telegram. You should be confident in your knowledge. You knew that it is going to console log John, but once I asked the question, are you sure? Then you start kind of rethinking what you know.
If we don't have like this control, it also will like output John yet. Without this row also it should output John. Like
without which row?
Object key name like.
No, it will give you an error because then you don't have this variable defined. So so the whole purpose, so we console log John. Okay, so that's the answer. So now you can, I think, see the whole purpose of the square bracket syntax, because now instead of, having instead of doing the dot name or specifying the value in the literal string value or the key value in the square brackets, you can have your key names in your variables. That's why the for in loop works, by the way. And now, okay, so can we do the same with, I don't know, the dot notation? Can we do that? So I'm going to say dot and object key. What does this return? What do you think? Okay, good. We're getting more confident. That's good. So okay, so now what it says, what it would, but what would it look console look? Yeah, we don't have that property in the object, but what would we see then in the console? Now, of course, TypeScript prohibits me doing this, and it even gives you an int. So what do you think we would see in console? Undefined, correct. So as with arrays, if you recall, with arrays, we have this thing, right? So if we say, give me the index -1, it returns you an undefined. If we would say, give me the index 556, but we have only 2 elements, we receive undefined. It's very similar in objects, right? So if we do not have the key defined in the object, what we get is undefined. And by the way, TypeScript just gives the in there. It says that property object key does not exist on the type. So it's also being helpful there. Okay, but wait a second. So that means we have this variable name object key. In the first example, it works. It says John, but why does it not work in here? Well, as we saw, these 2 examples were similar. So why does it not work here? So the answer to that is how the square bracket works, right? So the square bracket syntax is basically there to help you with this specific use case, right? So whenever you have your key name as a variable, whenever it changes kind of dynamically, that's when you use that's when you have to use. You don't have any other options. That's when you have to use the square brackets, because as you can see, clearly the documentation doesn't work there. So another thing we can do is, okay, so now we know that we can store our key names in variables. Okay, what else we can do? We can compute our key names kind of dynamically. So what that means, we can, for example, say tr plus ue, and this will give me the string true,
Which will be hello.
So you can do some kind of expressions in square brackets. And it also works the other way around, right? So during the creation, we can also do something like that. Const new key name equals to maybe person. Yeah, okay, let's go for a person. We can also do a very similar thing in here. So what we can do is we say square brackets, new key name is let's go for a normal one. Yeah, so we can say is that the new key name, like we're kind of dynamically creating a property here, and we use the very similar kind of syntax here. So we say the key name, the name of the key that you're going to use is stored in the variable new key name. So this effectively means this, right? So person or so this is basically the same, but this is very useful in case your key names are some dynamic values. Okay, so they're not static. Okay, so we can do that. Okay, so how do we fetch the value of this key? Okay, so maybe we can go for this. We already know we can specify variable names. It works. Maybe we can go for I don't know, person. That works. Does that work? It does. And can we use the I don't know, the dot notation? Yes, we can. So after creating the key, you can then access it with the dot notation. Now, one interesting case that you cannot use the dot notation at all is when your key consists of two words. You can have something like this, multi-word key, thanks to GitHub Copilot. We can do something like this. And now the way to get the value of this is not either, but only to use the square brackets. We cannot use the dot notation here, because if I would go for something like that, that would be syntax error, right? So this will never work. What we can do is we specify the key which is inside the variable name that works, and then if we would, the other way to do that, we can specify the same literal string value also in the brackets, and that would also work. However, I should change the key name here. So the only case you cannot use the dot notation is when your keys consist of multiple words.
Well, that is it using practice. So it's using practice. I never read keys like this.
Yeah. So what we're doing here,
Like it is.
yeah. I'm just showing that something like this is possible, and be careful with this. So just know that this exists. I never do something like this. So the way I usually would do this, I would go for the KML case, right? So I would do something like this. So I would never just separate them into separate words, into multiple words. This is usually how I would do it. And this is, by the way, the undefined that we discussed, right? So if the key is not found in the object, we get undefined. But I'm just showing that this is possible. So it's just so you know. Okay. That's that. Another way of creating keys in objects is so-called shorthand syntax. So what does that mean? Imagine we have this variable called vehicle. Okay, vehicle, and it contains vehicle name. My car. And I have a typo here, so vehicle, let me fix that. Okay, so I have a variable which is called vehicle name. What if I would like to have a key in this object, and the key name and the name of the key is also vehicle name? So the name of the variable and the name of the key in the object match, so they're the same thing. So the way I can do that is, so say something like this. Okay, so we kind of create. Let me just indent using convert into spaces, but I want only 4 spaces. Thank you very much. Okay, so what I can say, now I create a static property name, object key name called vehicle name. Okay, and then I say your value comes from this variable. Okay, so far all the values came from some literal strings, whatever. What I'm showing here is you can also specify the value of the key, which comes from a variable. So, okay, this works. So what can we do here? Let's remove all these console logs, and we'll do object value dot vehicle name. And we have my car. Okay. But there's a shorter way to do this. We can just remove this part. Okay. And that still works. So this is the so-called shorthand syntax. If the name of the key and the name of the variable match, instead of kind of duplicating the name and the key here, right? The key and the key name and the variable name are virtually the same. To avoid this, you can just write vehicle name, and these will both create a key in your object called vehicle name, and it will put the value of the variable vehicle name in that key. So this is a shorthand syntax, which is used a lot nowadays, which is normal, right? So you don't have to kind of duplicate or type vehicle name. It's a repetitive task. So in the language syntax itself, in the standard, they added this shorthand syntax. So So you don't have to type all these variable names and keep the key names repetitive. Okay. So what else we can do with this object? Well, okay. So we've seen some of the ways of pulling the values from objects. There are two syntaxes, right? So the dot notation and the square brackets. Now, what if I would like to get the name, to fetch the name of this, the key, the value of the key name from this object and put it in some kind of variable. So what I would do is maybe I would do something like this. I would say a name or a person name, right, equals to object value dot name, right? So I can do this. This works. Now we'll console out person name, and then we will get job, right? So let me remove all this junk. Okay, we don't need that anymore. Also, we don't need this anymore. Okay, so then we get person name. However, there is also another way to do this, and as I've shown the array destructuring, right? The shorthand the shorthand way of pulling values from arrays, right? So there's a very similar syntax in objects, as I already mentioned, and that syntax. Let me just comment this out for reference, and you will see how similar they are. So okay, so how are we going to do this? Now let's start with the declaration, right? But instead of the square brackets, in arrays we use square brackets. In objects we use curly brackets. So instead of square brackets, we go for curly brackets. And then, as you can see, we can pull out the value of name, and then we can go for this. So what this means is, where do we have it declared? Is also declared. It can redeclare block scope variable name. However, I don't think we have a variable called hello? Oh no, sir. Call name. Yeah, that's an error. That's for sure. Name. Okay. Person name. Okay, let's see if this works. I have no idea what kind of complaints. Okay. Oh, I don't see any name variable declaration here. However, it complains. It's declared. So, anyways, that was weird. So I've changed the key name from name to person name, and now the easy way of pulling. So the first option would be to do something like this: person name equals object value dot person name. This works. And the second, the shorter version, which is called object destruction, is this. So instead of the square brackets, we say curly brackets, and then we specify the name of the key, right? So we say, give me the value of the key person name from the object called object name, and put it into a variable name, which is the same as the key name. So we can do it like that. We can also rename our keys here, right? So if we would not like to have our variable name to be the same as the key name, we can put a colon there and say first name, right? So first name. Now, if you notice, TypeScript says cannot find person name. So person name is not a variable anymore because we renamed it into first name. So now I have to use first name. So that way you can rename your keys. And this comes handy when you have something like this: person name, John Doe, right? So this is called the snake case. This is the Python way of doing stuff. And you can, of course, kind of destructure your values like these. But as you recall, on the very first session, we discussed that in JavaScript, we use the Pascal case, right? So in naming functions, variables, whatever. So in this case, instead of using the snake case, this is where we could do the kind of renaming, right? So we can go for this, and then it works again. So this is one of the use cases of array destructuring. Okay, so I've shown you the shorthand syntax. Let's also see how the for in loop works, right? So we can have for, yeah, we already have it there. So for in loop looks very similar to the for off loop. However, it goes through the keys of an object, and for off loop goes through the values of arrays or whatever. And I don't think the for off loop works on objects yet. Just be very careful. For off loop does not work on objects. For in, however, does. As I explained, the for in loop is kind of specifically optimized to be used with objects. So as you can see, we have our values for key.
For in doesn't doesn't work for inside of it, but yes,
It works. What does give you
yes,
the values of the object?
yes,
Are you sure?
yes.
Okay, that's interesting, because what TypeScript says is that the object doesn't have the symbol iterator defined. I'm not going to explain this to explain what it is, but okay. Do you try that in the browser console?
Yeah.
Can you try it in some other place? Because as we see in the browser console, the const declaration thing, some confusing things happen there. So try some other environment, and if it works, then cool. Then they kind of fix something, but normally it should not work. Okay, so as you can see, the key, we just log the keys here, right? So we have vehicle name, we have true, we have person name, and 2 person names, right? So that's kind of expected. And the way we kind of also log the values of that object is like this, right? So now we have the keys, and then we can use the bracket syntax. We have to use the bracket syntax because now the name of the key is stored in the key constant, right? In the variable called key. So we have to use the bracket notation here. So that's one of the ways to iterate through single keys. Did you check it?
So then I did don't check or not. Or in your last column on we have so much thing. We submit this.
Let's just talk bulletuna sanat man. Nishata uğraşmadıma yeter satıma, but sonuçta expect çamanıma uğraşmadı burada. Okay. Just sorry, sorry, but off.
But the TS
It's not
As TypeScript.
TypeScript that.
It's JS.
But this in JS error response. That's about that.
Хотіла так чашкати.
Де ж хати? Learning how.
Яйцо, ліс, вода.
Isn't father over at Spotty?
Ну, поспать.
Рейврею сенсор, рейбрейн кашкак май арджес. Об'єкти, фоска об'єкти масинес.
I
Gewoon об'єкти цен косу маси were for.
Я вікне півія.
Na masz фотомат.
was sad. That's the thing.
So okay, I knew I was confident that it doesn't work for objects. I mean the key, the for off loop doesn't work for objects, and as you can see in here, it actually does not. This is an actually normal JavaScript error. However, our colleague was running the for off loop on an array, and it was working for him, so there was a confusion, and we kind of cleared that error. So yeah, so the for off loop doesn't work on objects. That's normal. There is a way to make it work. So what you can see here, the actual JavaScript error says object value is not iterable. Again, this is one of the things that I'm not going to explain. However, there is a way to convert a normal object to be iterable. And when you do that, then you can use the for off loop. But by default, you cannot use for off loop with normal JavaScript objects. And that's why we have the for in loop for objects. Okay. So I have one more topic called JSON here. I think I will skip that today because there is another task in web, something like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And there is one more task I would like us to do today, and it involves both objects and arrays and the dot reduce method. So we're going to do something interesting here with the objects. I'll see if Slick will show what it already. Recording. Okay. So let me explain what the task is about. Okay. So what we have in Telegram, I've just sent this array in Telegram. So we have a variable called writers, and it holds an array of objects. If you recall, arrays can hold anything, including objects, what we just learned. And each object has author and a book, right? So we have Hovhannes Tumanyan, who wrote the code, right? So and as you can notice, some of the names of the authors actually match, right? So we have two books from the same author. Okay. So what is the task here, you might ask? So now the task is to transform, but we'll not be using the map, right? So whenever I usually say transform, you should kind of click that we're going to use the map method, but we're not going to use the map method because the another method which we can use to transform things, and it is much more powerful, is the reduce method. So we're going to use reduce. Now, what we need to get is we should get an object where the keys are the names of the authors, and they hold an array of their books. Okay, so for example, for Hovhannes Tumanyan, there will be a key in the object called Hovhannes Tumanyan. As you have seen in JavaScript, we can have multi-word keys. So that's what we're going to use here. And so the first book was The Dog and the Cat, and the second one is The Code. Okay, so I'm not looking at the other options. So for example, let's say we had only one Yerisha Charen's book, and that would be Yerisha Charen's. And in an array, we should have Land of Fire. I don't know if we have we have another one, but another book from Yerisha Charen's, but I'm just showing some example what it should look like. Okay, so we are transforming this array of objects into an object, right? Where the key name is the author's name, and the value is an array of books from that author. So this is the task. What you should use is .reduce method on the writers array. This is what you should use. Can I just comment this line, please? Thank you very much. Tips. Sample of the result. Okay, and of course we have some more kind of values in this object here. So you should use .reduce on the array and somehow compose this offset. Now, to remind you how .reduce works, for example, if we have an array, let me just write it down here. An example of how .reduce works. So imagine we have an array of numbers. Okay, so the way it works, you specify a function to your reduce. The second option, the second argument after the comma, is the starting starting value for your reduce. And the starting value in this case for you is going to be an empty array because you are composing. Not an empty array. I'm sorry about the confusion, but an empty object. Why? Because you are transforming your array into an object. So if you would transform your array into a number, usually the initial value is a number. If you transform your array into a string, usually your initial value of your reduce is a string. So we have an empty object here because our kind of transformed value is an object itself. So your initial value will be an object, and then you can do something with that object, right? So you can kind of fetch some key or set some key with a value. So you should be doing this kind of stuff, right? So your accumulator will be your object, and you should be modifying that object somehow to transform your array of authors and books into an object where the key is the name of the author and the value is an array of the books from that author.
This item. What is item?
So item is the current element of your array. So current element of array. So that would be 1, then 2, then 3, then whatever it is.
And get this then this example.
And
Sure.
Thank you. Okay.
Am I gone? We're doing this now. You have 15 to 20 minutes to work on this. We're doing this task right now, okay? This is not on, but you will have some more works.